Welcome to the CEO of Destiny podcast, where you will find the tools to fulfill the purpose of your generation and wildly succeed in the marketplace. And now your host, Andre J. Benjamin.
We felt a difference even paying off our student loans. Probably we finished paying our student loans off, my wife and I, probably a few years ago. And I remember she said, take a snapshot of that, keep that. She said, I don't want them to lose it. I know they said it's final, but I need you to keep that on file. I said, wow, it's just crazy. You don't realize how much time goes by when you etch away at something. And of course you set your goals and whatnot, but to knock it out, there was a huge sense of relief that something that you've carried for quite some time gets knocked out. And it is,
and you have to help yourself though, Andre. You have to help yourself by lying to yourself a little bit, being a bit of a Walter Mitty. So what I used to do is, in those days there was no internet, so the credit card the statement would come in the mail, and my stomach would already be churning over as I'm opening it, trembling hands and all the rest of it, and I'd see it, and I would have that immediate thought of, oh, how am I ever going to get out of this? And as soon as you have that, like we were saying before, it's how you react to your thoughts that matters. So what I used to do is I used to sit back, I used to close my eyes, and I used to imagine myself being debt-free. And on the day that my credit card statement comes at its 0.00 balance, I imagine myself walking to the local liquor store, which was about half a mile up the road, buying a bottle of champagne for cash and sharing it with the family, right? Debt-free. And so as soon as I started doing it, and you feel like a fool at first because you think, well, how's that going to happen? But you could do it and do it and do it. And then all these miracles start showing up. Money starts coming in from all kinds of strange places. People are actually giving you money, for birthdays and Christmas because they couldn't think of anything to buy you for any presents to buy and stuff like that. I got insurance, I got tax back that I'd overpaid that I didn't realize. And all of a sudden, money was coming in to help me get debt free. And I didn't really have to work at it myself. I just was more sensible about not using the credit card again. And then that day arrived, and it was quite short. Somebody on one of the courses has said this as well, that it's happened in a miraculously short period of time they never expected. And then when it happened, I did that. And I walked up to the liquor store and I bought a bottle of champagne for cash. And nothing has ever, in my life, I can buy a lot of stuff now if I want, but nothing ever felt as priceless and beautiful as that moment when I did that. But you have to help yourself by how you think and use your imagination.
When did you see the value of, can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the misconceptions of the work week, because that effectiveness versus busyness, and kind of how you realize that almost like the spinning of the wheels with frivolous meetings or things of that nature, and just the value. When did you see that? When did you start to understand the value of time, I guess is what I'm getting at.
When I started my first company, 2003, I come out of the corporate world. There was no meetings, and I didn't want to call any meetings, but I still had the habit of, you've got to work, right? If you want to get on in life, you've got to work all the hours God sends, is what I was, educated to believe. And then as a single entrepreneur, as a one-man band with a hub model where everybody's doing the work, really, there wasn't a lot for me to do. But I made the mistake.
Can you break down the hub model a little?
Yeah, so what most people do is they come out of the corporate world and they say, okay, now I'm an entrepreneur. What I need to do is hire a head of sales, a head of marketing, a head of regulatory, a head of manufacturing, a head of distribution, a head of this, head of human resources, and I need a personal assistant. And then they go and spend all that money. And that's the same. The analogy I use is it's like buying a new house and then hiring a handyman to live in a spare bedroom in case something goes wrong.
Wow.
You wouldn't do that. But you do it in business. Most people do it in business. So you don't need to do any of that. If you're sensible enough while you're working, maybe it's a job you don't enjoy, you don't want to be in right now. But if you're sensible enough to think of it as paid training, and make sure that you go to all the different functions and try to learn about the key issues and how they integrate with the business. That's what I used to do. I used to make a nuisance of myself and go talk to all of these people and ask them to tell me about their jobs, what they do, what the issues, what frustrates them, and all this kind of thing. And what I realized was I don't have to be an expert in any of those functions. I need enough knowledge to be able to spot issues before they become serious and to see opportunities that otherwise I'd miss. And I'm not acting as CEO with a vice president of, say, human resources who's filtering out all the bad news for me because they want to be on the CEO's good side. That's what happens in corporate, right? So you take all of that out, and so it frees you up. But the challenge is, because we're educated to be worker bees, I sat at my computer waiting for an email and waiting for my phone to ring. I sat there for hours, and you get burned out. And I started to think, I must be doing something wrong. The phone's not going. There's not many emails. I must be screwing up. And anyway, things went okay. And after about 6 months, we needed to go to the UK to take a vacation, and it was a 3-week vacation. And I didn't tell anyone I was going. And 3 weeks is a long time. And I in those days, of course, no international cell phone. So when I got back to America, I thought the company's probably completely screwed up, messed up now. And then when I got back, I realized nobody had even noticed I'd gone. The thing had just kept working. And so I was burning myself out because of my sort of belief on how we should work. So I changed everything completely. And I changed to the 5-hour workday, and I now call it the practical magic of the 5-hour workday. And I realized that it's much more, and it's a scientific realization. We cannot concentrate for more than 2 hours and be effective, and we can't multitask. It's an impossibility. We do what's called context shifting. Just drive behind somebody who's texting while they're driving, and you get the feeling. And so what I do is I divide my day into a productive period of 2 hours. And I'm absolutely disciplined on that. So even if I'm in the middle, this could be the 2 hours. And if it hit the 2-hour point, I would cut off this conversation because I'm absolutely disciplined about stepping away. Because it's also scientifically showed that when we want to be creative, we're best when our brains are tired. That's when we're at the most creative. And so you need to be a bit of both as an entrepreneur. You need to be the pragmatic analyst and get stuff done, but you have to be incredibly creative. So you've got to balance it right. So I do two hours of a productive period, and then 2 hours I step away and I'll just go for a walk in the woods, or I'll have lunch. When my wife was here, I would have lunch with my wife, and it'd be a 2-hour lunch. And then I step back in for another 2-hour period. And I found that, and science backs me up, and I've got the science in the books, obviously. That's a very efficient and very productive way of working. But the benefit of it is you also get a balanced life. So I meet so many entrepreneurs that work 14, 15-hour days, and they're good and they're successful, but they're on their third marriage, and the kids don't recognize them and the dogs don't like them. What life is that? So by thinking of it differently and using science to help you, and being very disciplined about a 5-hour workday, you can be much more successful. You'll have bigger, brighter, incredible aha moments because you're deliberately taking relaxation time, and your family will still like you.
That matters most, is that it's what you value. Do you have any children?
No. My wife couldn't because of her illness, unfortunately.
Situation, yes. Yeah. So question for you. When you stepped into, can you talk a little bit about self-awareness and when you discovered what you were good at and how you made the decision? Because I know some of these industries, like even you talked about before the call started, about I'm still learning. Can you talk about that power of curiosity, but also starting with yourself, self-awareness? When did you figure out what you were good at?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm good at anything, to be honest, Andre. I couldn't answer that. I definitely know I'm not very good as a handyman, because people won't even let me near a toolbox. I did that analysis one time of, okay, I want to start a company. What am I good at? And I couldn't come up with anything because I was a sales manager, and there's skills involved, but they're not. I mean, anyone can learn them. They're not. You don't have to be a genius to be a successful sales manager. You just have to be able to manage a small group of people. And so I realized actually that is one of the secrets to business. If you're able to manage a small group of people, then you can build just about anything. And the reason I came up with that was because when I was a regional sales manager, I had 7 sales representatives. And then when I was a national manager, I had 7 regional managers. And then when I was vice president of commercialization, I had 7 directors of different things. And it was really just the same thing. I just managed, hopefully in a balanced way, in a good way, a small group of people. And they themselves had their own groups that they managed. And so I realized you can pretty much start any company in any industry, as long as you've got good intuition to hire the right people, and you're a nice enough fella or girl to manage people effectively. The world's your oyster, and that's what I've held to. So my first company, no employees. I started with a couple of $100. I sold that for 105.5 million. Most people would consider that a success, right? So I started another company, and then I combined 2 companies together, and I sold them for 300 million. Still no employees, and now I'm on company 5, 6, and 7. I'm at company 4. I'm in the beginning stages of negotiating an exit on company number 4, which will be $1 billion exit, and still no employees. And the funny thing is, when companies, especially with company number 4, some fairly sizable companies are interested and they're doing due diligence, they have an army of 70 people doing due diligence on a company with no employees. I find that hilarious.
You're like, this is irony. You want this asset that you're going to acquire, and it has 0 employees, but you're going to exhaust 70 employees to Why is he doing this with no employees? How's he doing this?
That's one of the dilemmas. I have to use a bit of smoke and mirrors so that they don't think it's a cowboy outfit, you know. But so I do change my accent, and I do pretend that I'm busy, and say, you know, when they call up and ask for the vice president of regulatory, and I've got some questions for the vice president.
Let me patch you through to the senior manager.
I have done that. I've done that while sitting on the beach. Would you hold, please, while I patch you through? And then I've changed my accent, but it's not easy for me to change my accent because they can still hear a little bit of English in it. It's madness, but that's the way it is.
So when you, what would you say are 3 key ways that you found managing well? Because it sounds like you're doing more of a collaborative joint venture, because you called it the hub model, but it seems like because you're relating to them more on their expertise, you're almost outsourcing their brilliance and bringing them in.
Absolutely, that's what it is.
More streamlined.
Well, I need to get a little new agey in answering that question, Andre, and that's it. So there are periods in the world where energy is a certain way. Okay, so we've actually gone through a period for several hundred years since the beginning of the first industrial revolution in 1740, where masculine energy, and this isn't a gender conversation, it's true energy. So that what we think of as masculine energy, and it's described as flat and linear and very step by step. So you can think of runways and freeways, and the business part of that masculine energy is the hierarchy, the hierarchical structure. All that is passing away through this, what we call today, the great age of transformation. And we're moving into a more feminine energy, which is fast and spiraling. And you're seeing it on the high street. You're seeing all those businesses that in 1950, the average age of a business was 75 years old. Today, it's less than 20. And the next few years, it'll be less than 10. And so the key thing here is now the ability to adapt quickly, to change quickly. And you can't do that in the old hierarchy structure where everyone's response to an issue is, let's call a meeting, you know, or let's hire somebody to figure this out. You have to have intuition in a big part. Intuition is playing a bigger and bigger part in the decision-making process. And I'm seeing this in everyone I'm working with. So even all of my vendors now, so I have, you know, vendors doing manufacturing and vendors doing regulatory and all this kind of thing. I'm seeing those companies also start to change, and a lot more female CEOs, which I'm delighted about, is coming to the table, and they've already made the decision. And the thing about the feminine energy, the spiraling, yes, it's more nurturing. Yes, it's more trusting, but it's also totally unforgiving. And if you look back I'm a history buff, so if you look back in history at all the successful female warriors, they never stopped to pick up their injured, and they never kept prisoners. They were ruthless. And so this feminine energy is a ruthless energy. And if you don't get up with it and get caught up in it, you will get left behind. And if you want proof, just go look at your local strip mall. How many companies that were, you know, household names don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Circuit cities.
Folding left and right.
Yep.
And you're doing that do you ever go back to the UK?
Yes. Well, I try to. The UK is in total lockdown. It's like a prison at the moment.
I'm staying in an ideal state versus the modified world. The world's globally modified right now. But I'm saying before the modifications, you were going home pretty often.
No, I just go once a year, but for 3 weeks. And I used to go visit everybody, but then you'd forget to visit somebody and they'd take it, you know, they get indignant. So what we started doing was hiring a house in London and having people come visit us and have a holiday, basically. And that worked really well. So that took the pressure off everyone. And we got tickets to the Wimbledon tennis thing. So everybody got to watch some tennis. And that was you know, even if they didn't like me, they'd come down for the tennis. So,
wow. The town that you grew up in had much changed.
It hasn't changed hardly at all. And most of the people I was at school with are still there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like stuck in time. So
that's crazy. So you went back and you're just like, man, it's almost everything, the cadence of life, everybody's still doing the same.
I went back to the house I grew up in 2000, and we went into that house because we were evicted from above a store in Liverpool. Yeah. And we kind of escaped to the country, and you could do that in those days, hide from the bailiffs in the rural areas. And so I grew up in that house, and then after my mother died, my father was evicted because we found out that the rent hadn't been paid for about 7 years, but the owners, who were farmers, loved my mum enough not to make that an issue because she had cancer. And so they kicked my father out, and the front door was closed, and I went off into the world, you know, and I came to America in '94. And we had so my sister, brother, and I had a kind of a reunion in 2000, just because it was a good excuse to do it. And we went back to the house, and it was still as it was the day that my father was kicked out. So the kitchen table was still set for breakfast. The bedclothes were still on the bed. You know, his pajamas were still lying on the thing. It was quite bizarre, but that's typical of that area. There's just nothing changes.
That blew me away when I read that in your book of you saying walking in there and you say everything was in the same. That
like the Mary Celeste.
It felt like a ghost town. Like you walked in and you're like, everything's exactly like they left. That's has to be surreal. It's like it just was frozen. And
the mailman had kept delivering mail probably for about 6 months because there's all these final demands that piled up high like a mountain.
Crazy,
you know.
So when you you chose your wife knew at the point, there was a point when you launched your first company that you finally had made a decision, and you you talked about the value of quiet time. I spent time in prayer and meditation, talking to God daily. So I know the value of it, especially starting it before my kids get up and before my wife gets up, like to beat the day and get that time. And it just it's a powerful, allowing you to clear and to basically hear. Your ability to hear is tremendous versus the busyness of life. But talk about how when you came home about to start your first business, what that conversation was with your wife and why you chose to launch into your first business.
Well, so I came up with this idea, and I was walking through. I just had a row with the CEO, and I was walking through Minneapolis Airport, and it just hit me. And this happens when you meditate. So I was already meditating. I'd been meditating since I was about 17 or 18, because that was one of the habits that was in all of those biographies. Even though they didn't call it meditation, they called it different things. But even people like Henry Ford, he used to go to his old farmhouse, which was dilapidated, and sit on an old rocking chair and just contemplate. Same sort of thing, you know. You just have to give yourself time and allow the universe to connect with your, billion neurons, your 100 billion neurons. Most of the time, most of the day, our neurons are screeching to a halt to allow us to do our little digital things, But if you just sit quietly, the neurons can go out to play. So I was already doing that. So I had this brilliant idea, and I spent on the plane flight home. I did the back of the napkin thing and all the rest of it. And I was so excited. But then I thought, how am I going to convince my wife now? We just bought this house 7 months ago. It's on the water in Florida. It's beautiful. It's got everything you could possibly want. It was the house of her dreams. How am I going to convince her that not only am I going to start my own company, which is risky, but I'm going to have to move to Seattle to do it. And it's June and it's raining in Seattle. And so I planned it out perfectly. I was word by the time I got home, I was word perfect. And I opened the front door and she looked at me, and her intuition, she just read my face, and she goes, "Oh, you're starting the company." And that was it. And I planned to take her out for dinner, and I was going to lead into it. I was blown away by it. So she says, "So when do we go?" And I was just, I didn't even have to. I said, "We're going to
sell this home. Let's go. Come on."
And of course we did. So we only just moved in there. I think we paid $700,000 for it or something like that. This is it back in 2000. And we sold it for $950,000 7 months later. Only just 7. I guess we bought it cheap and didn't realize. Wow. So it all worked out, because that $250,000 was priceless to me when I started the company, because it took me 18 months to raise the money to get the rights to the product. So either it's all meant to be, or I just was absolutely blessed to have a wife with incredible intuition.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do us a favor. If this was useful in any way for you, please go to iTunes and leave us a review. Reviews will allow others to easily discover the podcast. If you'd like more information and to receive a free download, Rediscover Your Destiny, go to ceoofdestiny.com. Thanks again, and tune in next time.